Good morning from here, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Afe Adogame, and I serve as the project chair and co-director of the Engaging African Realities project, which is hosted by Calvin University. I would like to welcome you to the second offering of the webinar series, which we started last year, and many of you were part of that very rich conversation. So I would like to welcome you to the second series. And but just for your save the date, I can immediately announce that the next webinar series will take place on March 30th. So stay tuned. March 30th would be the next webinar. And be reminded that we will do this quarterly, which means that there will be 4 webinars throughout this year. And I can't wait to be part of that and to engage with our very, seasoned scholars and colleagues. So please take note of that. Before I move any further, I would like to thank Nelly and Nebudo, who have made this possible technically, but also who have reached out to you before now in terms of registering for this event. So thank you, Nebudo. Thank you, Nelly, for your stellar work. Let me just indicate that for this particular webinar today, more than 102 registered. And I think that shows the interest, but also the popularity of this event. Please tell your friends and colleagues that this is a place to be. You cannot be part of this conversation and go back the way you came. So I would really encourage you to be part of all our conversation series, but also pay attention to conversation through podcast. But at the same time, we have our Facebook series, which is always current and rich. Let me also welcome those of you who are joining in multiple capacities. And I was just looking through the over 100 of you who registered for this event. I know we're expecting many more to join. But let me directly address you in the way you identified yourself. Some of you are here who are current grantees, and some say they are team members. Others are here in their capacity stating that they were former applicants. So maybe former applicants who didn't win. So I encourage you next time to, don't give up, apply again. We also have in our midst those who indicated as future applicants. That is very interesting. So keep up with our activities, and when it is time, please do apply to our programs. Some of you are joining as supporters. One says, I applied once. Please do that again. One said discovery. You're just trying to discover. So I hope that at the end of this conversation, you would have discovered that this is a rich space. Others have said new interested member. Another said interested observer. Another said hoping to be grantee. Please keep those hopes alive. We also have graduate students, doctoral candidates who are here. We have friends, those who have indicated that they are friends, and then others, or those who have joined us who are aware of activities through WhatsApp, and past grantee, and so on and so forth, and facilitators. And what it also shows is that this is really an international or a global representation, participants from different parts of Africa. I can also see from Europe, Norway, UK, the US, and other parts of the world. So I want to really welcome you on behalf of the Engaging African Realities program. All right, I think the most important welcome is to our guest today, who is not a visitor to NEGEL projects. She has served in multiple capacities as advisor, as a grantee herself. I don't know if she will categorize herself as a past grantee or supporter, or all of the above. So I would like to just start by giving her, I don't want to take much of her time, but I'll give her a space to introduce herself. But let me just mention two things that our guest today is Professor Mary Amenga-Etego, who was a current grantee of the Theological Advanced ATA project in the last dispensation. And she continues to work with us. She served as an advisor as well. And Professor Amenga-Etego is the current head of Department of Religions at the University of Ghana, Legon. So I promise her that those are the only two things I will say about her. Now, this conversation will be very interactive, so bear with us. It's going to be a conversation between her and I. I will pose the nasty questions and she will respond kindly. And then we would engage each other for a couple of minutes. And then afterwards, we'll open it up for Q&A, for interventions, for question and answer. All right, so without wasting any more time, Professor Amenga-Etego, who are you?
Just as you have called my name, that's the person I am by name. And you have also explained that I'm the current HOD of religions at the University of Ghana. I belong to the College of Humanities and the School of Arts. And I'm a past grantee. I was a PI or PL, some people will say. And I continue to work with the team this year as a part of the selection team, which was a privilege and a new insight to what happens at the other end of the spectrum. So that's where I will stop for now. And if there are questions, they can ask.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that modest introduction of yourself. But I would like to go back before I go forward. So could you say something about your, after your earlier life, your academic, training and background, just to bring us up to speed?
I had my first degree and second degree in this department of at the University of Ghana, Legon. And then I went to work in the field as a gender and development coordinator for a church, the Roman Catholic Church in the Diocese of Nabrungu-Bolgatanga. After 3 years of a project, 10, I returned to the university as a lecturer and went to the University of Edinburgh for my PhD, where Afi became one of my supervisors, joined and became one of my supervisors. And my main supervisor was James Cox, and I fall within the area of religious studies. And back to Legon since 2008. I was back to Legon and I've been a staff rising to the position of head of department and associate professor of religions.
Thank you so much, Professor Amenga-Etego. We would like to talk generally about your experiences with Nagel, during that lifetime. I wanted you to speak a little bit about your specific project where you served as a project leader, and then about your team, who were your collaborators, if you want to put it a bit more sarcastic, who were your partners in crime?
I had a team of 5, and I don't want to just go straight to the title, because the title was jointly arrived at, and as a joint program, moving from different teams that each one of us brought, and together we created this new team. So we're a team of 5. Paul Enovo, a Nigerian but resident in Atlanta, US. Sarah Fretine, at that time was at Vancouver, but now in Münster, Germany. Ngozi is Nigeria, a lecturer in Nigeria, and myself and my co-host, Abraham Kwachi. Together, we came up with different teams, different narratives, different topics, so wide and diverse. At first, we thought, based on our different interests, we could not come together and form a team. But upon discussions on WhatsApp and YouTube, not YouTube, what they call it, Skype, those days we used to use Skype. We eventually came to a team that could bring all our different ideas together that could form a particular topic that was of interest to us. So eventually we came up with literature, music, and prayer repertoires as sources of African values, spiritualities, and Christian theology. So making up the linguistic background that our colleague from Nigeria came back with, the literature that Paul from the US brought in, the African indigenous religions that I work around, the missions that Kwachi comes with, and the African Christianity that Sarah was working with. So together we blended them up and we made up this team after several hurdles and different titles as we journeyed along. It took us over 3 months or 3 weeks, because by the time we finished and finally arrived at the title, I think it was around 3 months that we were comfortable working with the team, because by then we had constructed our project and it had brought in that all the information. There was a synergy. That was when we knew that we had a topic that was interesting enough to go.
No, thank you for sharing your very rich team, but also the complexity in terms of bringing together people from different disciplinary backgrounds, and which made your team very interdisciplinary. And of course, I mean, for such a complexity, it's also not easy. And I wanted, if you could share with the audience how you navigated the several hurdles from composing the team, and also definitely those times you were throwing blows at each other. Could you share how you navigated some of those crises? Because bringing together people from theology, religious studies, linguistics, literature, and all that is not an easy thing. So I think some of our current grantees probably can learn from those hurdles that you faced, but also how you surmounted them. So if you would like to share any experience, thank you.
I would say that the point of interest in our team was the fact that there was, and at least till the end of the program, there was this interest to reconsider one's perspective in the light of the group. And there were many people who would say, okay, I don't mind if that will work. That was the good part in the team. And that was a strong team that went through our project cycle to give in when the group interest is at stake. And so, for instance, we will say that, okay, I want to look at African indigenous religions. I want my title to be there. I want what I wanted to do to be there. But then you realize that when you say, okay, let's look at what will you do? What do you want to do? It's African indigenous religion, but what exactly are you interested in doing? What is the focus of your research area? And it was when we moved from the individual titles and interests and study or disciplinary area to the specifics of what one wanted, the objective of which the fellow wanted to participate in the project, and the area of research, then we found that we could connect very well. So for instance, you are in linguistics, but you are looking at prayers and music in church grounds or church settings. So it is easier for somebody who is already doing music, who is into African indigenous religions, but it's within the context of music to relate easily with the musical aspect within the two, these two people. So we could connect at that level. Secondly, we realized that two people were looking at key figures, African indigenous, if you want to say, contributions to the Christian church. One was looking at a woman and the other was looking at a man. So they are the individuals who have contributed to Christian indigenization and also the spread of Christianity. But the two of them, though they come from different countries, one from Canada and one from Ghana, they were looking at Ghanaians. So it was another point where we could look at that as individuals and as personalities who were interested in participating. Then we had the other person at the beginning. Literature looked like it was all alone because there was no connection there. But the fellow was looking at the suburb movement, and the suburb movement, to understand its reality in contemporary Nigeria, was to look at the church in Nigeria and the live activities of that church, surrounded not just in the past, but in prayers, in church activities, which involve music and various forms of articulation. Again, immediately linked up to the music and the prayer group, which blended the literature and the linguistics and the indigenous personality who are disciplinary area that was interested in music. So having had these interests and yet paying attention to their unique specialization so that you don't lose sight of their uniqueness, we could come together and now look at what are we driving at. They are all sources of studying religion. They are all sources of articulating the realities of contemporary Christianity and African contexts. So if we understood this, and fortunately for us, the research context that is the settings under which they were going to carry out these researches were going to be in Ghana and Nigeria. So it wasn't easy for us to look at that and say, okay, wow, this is our meeting point, and this is where we could move on from. And so that was where we came together. First, saying that I'm ready to let go if it will benefit the group. And secondly, looking at what exactly we are looking for, not where my disciplinary area is, because it will be difficult to tie them. But getting to that point, it made it easier for us to come together to work. So that's how we overcame the hurdles of finding a team, but also working. And one of the things we did is that each person was supposed to write a synopsis of what exactly they wanted to do at the beginning of the project. So each person, you had an abstract, you had key, your objectives, you had your research questions, and then you had some bibliography. These we shared among ourselves to be able to understand how each person was interested in achieving their aims. And I believe these were the things that cemented us and allowed us to work together. So we had WhatsApp calls, we had Skype sometimes to discuss them. Okay, what do we do? And then we kept mailing each other and texting each other. So somebody is writing something and then has to text the other for more information. And that also supported the group at the foundational stages. But other than that, we had another smooth area was the fact that, I don't know if it was smooth at the beginning anyway, but was the issue of budgeting. Because we have an amount that you have to budget to. And I say it was easy, and I'm still querying myself whether it was that easy, because it's a budget that you have to work on. I have been fortunate to do some budgeting because I have worked in the NGO sector. But maybe not everybody has had that. So we asked, what are the key things that you would like to do? And so they give us the key things that they would like to do. So if you say, I'm going to move from, my fieldwork is going to be in Ghana and I'm in Vancouver, and my fieldwork is going to be in Nigeria, but I'm in Canada, US. What are you going to do? And so we already know that we have to travel internationally, and that will contribute to the budget. So how much will be the travel for research? So that was the initial thing we thought of. And then if you are going to do the research, how long are we going to give to each person to do field research? Those initial things made it easier to start the budget in place. However, I said there are problems because the nitty-gritties, people don't pay attention to that until they start the field work, until they start the project themselves. And then they realize that, oh, I said I will travel from Nigeria to Ghana, or I will travel from Ghana to South Africa. But I didn't make room for the fact that I will first travel to go and get a visa. And that will cost the project. But I know that I said I will get a visa, but nobody else knows where you are going to get the visa. Maybe you will sit in your house and get a visa. So you didn't budget for that. And all of a sudden, it comes out when the budget has been accepted, and now you have to start working. So these are some of the issues. Maybe later, if there are questions, then I can answer that.
No, thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. Yes. Let me, I think one thing is the conceptualization stage. I'm going to move to the field work and data analysis and dissemination stage very soon. Could you remind the audience, so what came out of this, your brainstorming? How did you formulate your research question or your core objective, and what was it?
Wow, I hope I do remember.
Okay, well, give us a sense of, yeah, what were you guys, driving at, having brainstormed and, brought synergies from the different fields and the different interests. So what were you getting at with your research? What were you trying to unpack?
If I remember well, and maybe I will try to see if I can remember that very well. But I think what we're trying to find out is how, at the initial stage, how is African Christian spirituality alive? What is the nature of it, and how is it alive in the individual as well as in the community level? Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the team members posing, who is in the area of Christianity, posing that question and saying that we need to not just think about what we are saying, but at the end of the day, the project is about African realities, the realities of African Christian spiritualities. So we need not just sit and look at it as academics, but also to think about how it's manifesting in the society. So that was one area that brought up one of the clarities. And then the second issue that came up was, how do we convey the information from the practicality of what is happening in our community to the reader. And since we already had two of our readers or our team members who were not within the continent, but outside the continent, it was easy for us to do that. But also, we were also in a unique position because a team member, one of our team members, was not even African. So there were certain things that we will say that to put it that way, non-African will say, I think if we say this, some people will not understand what we are talking about. And so there was this juggling of language and terminologies that's helped us to come up. And I remember, I don't know if I can still remember where I have that. So then came up with the team, what do we exactly think we can achieve at the end of the day, and how do we put that into practice? So what at the end came up was that we wanted a research question and an objective that could respond to how African spiritualities from these different angles could make meaning, not just to an outsider looking into African Christianity, but to the African student and the African believer of Christianity, accepting that it makes sense. And so I will say that the juggling between what can make sense in locally and what can make sense internationally was the focus of the driving force for this creation.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that feedback. I'm sorry to have put you on the spot, but I have some nuggets about what your project entailed. I remember that you were trying to see what are the ingredients of African spirituality. And you looked at that from these different perspectives, whether from the perspective of, language, and then others from the indigenous religions, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think that came out very, very well. And before I ask you a question about perhaps the fieldwork and the data analysis, you were the project leader. And I think you've spoken nicely about how you guys were able to work together. Could you share one of those nasty moments and how you navigated those nasty moments as a project leader? So in other words, what did you learn from a nasty moment that your group experienced? So tell us first, if you would like to share, what was one of those nasty moments and how did you navigate that as a leader? What did you learn as a project leader?
In terms of implementation, I think the first hurdle we had to cross was the fact that we needed to adhere to budget submission of reports and the timelines. And as it is, you can discuss and have ideas, but when it comes to submitting the individual reports that constitutes the group reports, then people sometimes delay in submitting. And if Nelly is here, if you bear me witness, sometimes I will send my report just a minute to time in Ghana time so that I don't miss it. And then my group members, the way if you put it that way, I could put it that I nag by pestering them, especially anybody who falls in sending me the reports early. It's like I'm on their neck. And some of them get frustrated because, they don't understand. They think that I know what they are doing. Some of them think, you know what I'm doing. We just had a discussion about it. But I want you to put it in writing so that I have a small report in case there is a need for it. I can just look for it and present. And so timelines are problematic meeting. And every team leader, it is periodic. And you may discuss it and you think that you have 1 week away. Before you realize it's just this evening. And then you say, oh, I'm sorry. But the thing is that the PI cannot say I'm sorry to the project timeline because I have to submit within a deadline. And sometimes it's nerving that they think that you are pestering their life or you are making things difficult for them because they are not the ones who are supposed to juggle with the timeline. And I think this was one of the biggest problems that we had in terms of the project itself. The second one was in budgeting, and not budgeting, but adhering to budgeted lines. So you budget for a project, and it's maybe, let me use Ghana cedis since I'm spending Ghana cedis. So you budget 5 Ghana cedis. And by the time you are doing the project, maybe there's a change. The change maybe could come from you. The change maybe could come from the economic system because of inflation and other things. But you cannot change the budget line at that moment because the project says that, and if you want to make a change in any of the budget lines, you have to seek permission for approval. The PI is not only waiting, is not working just with the Nelly or the Nigel team and her own individual team members, but it's also working with the host institutional accounting system and processes. If you need money and it is within the things that we have agreed to work with, you have to request on time, give the team leader time to meet the institutional regulations and rules. And people don't sometimes seem to overlap. They think the money is with the PI. So when I ask for it, the PI must give. And so the PI has to also wait, and they're looking for the money maybe yesterday, but they requested it for maybe 3 days ago. They wanted it yesterday. And your institutional system may say, okay, we need verification. We have our own checkpoints. Make budget demands within a certain period. So you are juggling with different institutions and different people. So we are that in terms of institutions, we are dealing with the Nigel as an institution and dealing with your own host institution. And they each, though they are working on the same project, they each have their peculiarities that you have to adhere to, because your host institution has to be accountable and wants you to meet certain, what they call it, budget lines for them to be able to respond to you. So for instance, in Legon, once the budget said you cannot take some money more than what you have or from a different budget, you have to always justify every time you are making an application for, you have to justify what it is for. The budget line, the particular thing you have to identify it in your budget line, justify why you are collecting it, whether it is the time and you have money in your system to collect it before you can make the budget, the claim, so that it's easy to take it from you, for you. But that is not what your team members are maybe looking for. And so you have problems with your team members with regards to that. Sometimes when it was budgeting time, as I said, you made a budget, or people just see that, oh, they give you the bigger headings of what they want to do. And they are not paying attention to the nitty-gritties of the budget headlines. So when they realize that you say, okay, you have put certain things, certain amounts in their budget line. This is for field work. This is for accommodation. This is for transcription. This, and the total comes together and it looks a bit bulky. They are happy about it because the figure looks good. And perhaps maybe they didn't think it was a problem. But as they begin to work with the figures, they realize that the money doesn't look that much. Then all of a sudden they want more for each of the topics or each of the things that they have to do. And you can't meet that budget line because you don't own the system and you don't own the money, and you can't just move the money around. And if you move the money around, some projects cannot be met. Then the third area is team members sometimes making, we kind of delegated certain activities to different people to do. And because you have been delegated the work to do, you are responsible for certain aspects of the work, you may go ahead and think that then you can move on with all the needs, maybe looking for the resources, the personnel, and other things that have to do to be able to carry out that work, which is good in itself because you need to arrange for it. But sometimes there's an oversight that that person may not reconcile what is happening with the rest of the team members. Because, okay, I've been given the right to do this, so they go ahead and do it. But at the end of the day, the team members may not be happy because you didn't consult them, even though you were given that right. They expect you to consult them in the hiring, in the disbursement, or in the project's execution. And so that was also another area that we had problems at the beginning. But as I said, we were able to resolve them because at the end of the day, we were able to say that, okay, it doesn't matter as long as these key things are met. And whoever was doing that also made provisions to meet those key things. So you overlook the minor ones because then it becomes a minor issue. The fellow had the interest of the group. The fellow was looking for somebody who can work for us to achieve the objective. And the fellow has put in the opportunities for all of us to meet those different aspects of our projects that we wanted to do. So that's how we resolve some of these hurdles.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. I think these are very pragmatic issues you've raised. For instance, keeping to timekeeping, meeting deadlines, and you know that if you want to see Nelly's red eye, miss the deadline for submitting a report. And then, of course, this is a problem. You are the PL and you want to do that at the right time and your colleagues are there, you know, with all different problems. So having to push them around becomes an important point.
And if I may add something else, that was an institution. If you happen to know that you'll be missing a deadline, let us start writing to Nelly and asking for permission. Because I did that at one point, not at the final budgeting and submitting of the final budget line. I had to talk to my, send a message ahead of time and tell that, look, when the budget ends, the institution now has to maybe do its own budgeting system and trash out things before it can send you the report. So now that it has ended, they need some time to send you the budget from the institutional, the expenditure and everything from the institutional level. And so I was given the extra time. So if you know that there is the real need for you to miss a particular deadline, it's always important that you communicate it early and ask for permission. I'm sure they will give you because they gave me, but let them know what is going on and let them be in sync with you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. I think that's an important piece of advice for current and future grantees. Don't take anything for granted. And then, of course, the second point concerns the budget, you know, which is very important. Don't invent a budget because it will bite you later. You have to make sure that your budget is realistic and it actually is speaking to your needs. Don't just make sure that, you know, you have 10 budget lines and everything ends with 0, 0, 0, 0. That makes it suspicious. And finally, I think the question about team spirit, you nailed it. You know, it's very important. Cultivating team spirit is not automatic. You have to get your hands dirty. You can have a team without spirit. And if you don't have spirit that goes with the team, it will be replaced with chaos. So there's nothing set in stone. You know, you have to look at your own specific situations and people you are working with to be able to cultivate team spirit. Yeah, we can go on and on this, but let me move to the second part of my questioning. I'm looking at the time as well. Our current grantees have moved from fieldwork to data analysis, and now they are trying to deal with dissemination. Looking back at your own time, how did you manage? Perhaps you could just very briefly on this, because it will lead me to your tangible outputs and stuff like. How did you negotiate your time between fieldwork and data analysis, and especially struggling to cope with the budget and timeline you set for yourself?
First, one of the things, let me maybe take us a bit back. One of the things that helped us in that area was our meeting with our PA. Because at the beginning, even at the point that we have already got the grant, some members of the team had topics or field contexts that were too large, or projects that if they were to do the fieldwork, they would never have finished the fieldwork before the project ended. And so the first meeting with our PA, which was personal for some of us and online for others, was very instrumental. And that helped to solve the problem of be able to handle our fieldwork to an extent, and also manage the data that we were going to work with, because it reduced the workload tremendously to smaller areas. That gave us deeper field work and insights to what we're doing. Now from that the fact that many of us were able, or some of us were able to shrink our project areas, field areas, it was then possible for them to go to the field and not to move about, because as I was saying, commuting, you need resources to commute from one section to another. And you also needed indigenous protocols. Some places you have to adhere to the indigenous protocols by doing certain things. So that helped us to get deeper information. And some people realized that two team members could actually use some field work, that the two field sites that the two of them could work together. And for instance, one of my team members from Sarah from Canada, then the two of us from Ghana here managed to do certain interviews together. And we're lucky, for instance, to interview Professor Nketia before he died. Kwabena Nketia, the musicologist, you see. So the fact that we're able to put ideas together meant that we could also share and do some analysis, even by discussing. And such discussions were fruitful for us. And Ngozi and Paul were able to also use some sites in Nigeria together. And so they were able to relate and also do some discussions and share some of the material. So when it comes to analysis, there were things that we could share ideas and then enrich our analysis, even though we also have our individual sites for research. Now, the field work itself, I think, was not that much of a problem, in the sense that everybody knew where they were going and they were able to get their material. But there were some people in the Nigerian context where some field works had to be canceled for some time, but that is normal with African context. When you go and there's a problem, they don't adhere to your timelines. So they had to go back a second time to be able to do that. It happened to them again when they were doing the filming for our video, our documentary. So they had to go back a second time. That is time costing and resource costing. And that will also affect your budget. If you want the film, you can't afford to say, then you won't do it again. But you have already paid for resources for the team to go there. But it was not their fault that they couldn't do it. So these things contributed, one, to the material that we got. And then everybody had the chance now, at the end of the day. We didn't go around. There are some people who have not even transcribed some of their data yet that they got from the field. And there are data that we wanted something to meet the main project team. What was required of us, which is our documentary and our group paper. And so we selectively make sure that what you need, the data you need to contribute to this paper, make that your priority. The other one you can continue to work on for life. For instance, I had the same thing in Ghana here, that I had to go the field work to do field work. Originally, it was not in my focus, but as I was interviewing people, everybody said, you must interview Kwesi Sarpong. And it was interesting for me in the sense that I am not an account, but I was working on an account issue, which is out of my comfort zone. Language-wise, I am not in that area. And my language proficiency in account is next to nothing. You know, I understand better than I speak. The diction is wrong, and then most of the things are wrong. And I went to interview this man. I traveled all the way to Kumasi and had audience. We sat down, he was talking, I was doing and writing. And then all of a sudden he said, you know what? What I'm doing is useless. Why don't you go back, find time, and come and spend the night? And the very things you are looking for, they will be demonstrated in practical terms for you to see. And so I had to come back, arrange, make plans, and now go with somebody and assist my field assistant. We spent the night there. He accommodated us, but made sure that the team, because I was looking for dancing, I was looking for the different types of dancing and the mannerism and the symbolism that went with it to go with my research. Such a thing, you can't go and interpret it within one time and expect that a whole night of work, of dancing, of symbolism, alongside teaching, can be interpreted within a short time with filming for you to be able to produce all these. So strategizing and making use of what you need. And then that means that you must, what they call it, label your field work properly so that you know what to go for when you need it, so that you don't have to search through files upon files just to find, or you have to say, I don't know what I'm looking for, therefore you have to transcribe everything before you arrive at what you are looking for. So these were the things that helped us. Labeling our work, identifying what we needed, and making sure that we met what was required first before any other interest.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. This is very rich. I'm looking at my time and I want to give space to the audience to contribute. So I'm going to combine two questions right now. And if you forget to answer the other, then I'll prompt you again. I think one of the other questions I would like you to speak about is your tangible outputs and how you went about realizing them. But before you do that, our current grantees are on, towards the end of the second phase. So I wanted you to, what kind of advice would you give to current grantees who are now in the mid stages of their research, having collected data and making sense of them towards interpretation and analysis? Maybe also what kind of dissemination strategies did you use at that time? And then after that, I will come to now what you are doing with the data that you didn't use then. I hope that's not a mouthful already, but I'm just trying to combine questions because of time.
So first, the tangible outputs that we did was the publication of the joint paper, which Nigel assisted with the publication. And then secondly was our video documentary, which we posted also on YouTube and worked around that area. The other intangible ones that we did was the various conferences. We did curriculum development. I didn't add curriculum development to tangible because it's not something anybody sees except the reports and the fact that the various units that benefited are seen. That's why I didn't add it. But we did a number of curriculum development with the various people. And For instance, 2 of our colleagues who are teaching are making use of that. Each one of them has indicated where they added, filled some of their material to teaching. And we in the department, the co-host, the host and the co-host, we were able to use that information on curriculum development when we were going in for curriculum development revision for reaccreditation. We made use, it was very helpful for us because we were able to share the ideas that we had, and we were able to also make other inputs to some of the material that we're dealing with. So it's tangible, but it's not seen out there. Thirdly, we had a conference, and the conference papers are in the process of editing. We haven't finished the editorial work. It's supposed to come out as an edited volume, and we are still working on that. It will interest you to know that one of the things that I myself have taken by surprise is the fact that this year, or no, last year, the University of Ghana has something they call uptake, research uptake. And research uptake, every PI that has a project that comes to the university through the research or the research office, what happens that when the project comes to an end, at the end of the year, the budgeting year and everything, they will look at what each project contributed to what we call internally generated income or fund. And then they will see if, depending on, they will give a percentage to the research PI to do an uptake. So I was contacted and I told them that we have this output number 5, which then you have to identify, as I said, Lagos will not give you the money if you don't have something you want to do. So you have to tell them what you want to do and how you want to do it. So I applied for it and I said I was going to use it to do the editorial, which is output number 5, which is in my project, our project which they have. And so even though the money wasn't much, it's less than 900 Ghana cedis, but over 880 something, 87 or something thereabout, was given to me to do that uptake, which is going to be used to go and do the editing. It's from the proceeds of what the University of Ghana got as
indirect cost.
Institutional indirect cost, yes. And the original dates that I gave for it was 25th to 28th to go and do this work. It may change because of the reopening of the university, certain things have been scheduled for that day, but that money has been given to us to go in there. So that's, again, still working on what we have planned to do, which we said we are going to do after the project. A number of colleagues have also shown how they are using them. Individually, they had small forms, but some of them, the ones that were captured by the project as part of the documentary, they captured more videos than needed for the film. These things were sent to the individuals, and we are using them for teaching and for other things. So this is how we have used it. Others have, 3 publications have come out from this, and there are 3 others that have been submitted for publication. And from some people have made podcasts with some of the material, some of our team members, and 2 others have, one has got a dictionary entry from the material, and 2 papers are still online. Still in the stages of production.
Yes. No, thank you, Rosemary. I think you are leading to even what I would like to ask you next as a to wrap up this session. Again, the idea that the data you collect, within a given point in time, you never exhaust analyzing. It's just like a PhD thesis. If you gathered data to write a PhD thesis, perhaps what goes into your dissertation or thesis is only 40% of the data you gathered. So what do you do with the rest? Do you throw it into the dustbin of history, or do you continue to tap? So my next question, which is perhaps my final question to you, would be, to what extent do you continue to tap from or fall back on the data that you gathered during your time as a PL with NAGEL. And then perhaps you could also link that up with how the results of your project continue to shape your teaching and curriculum in your department and the university.
Wow, that's a mouthful. If I remember everything.
Okay, let me start. If you lose any, yeah.
Yeah. So falling back on the data depends on what happens. For me, the key area, and at this point, I'll just refer to myself because one of my colleagues has indicated various ways in which he has used it in lectures. You know, 3 of us are in the lecture field now. One is not in the institution, but the other one has taken leave of absence. So 3 of us are currently in the field. And one has added religion, which has nothing to do, from her perspective, prior to this research, had nothing to do with linguistics, but has been added to her socio-linguistic class, issues on religion and music and other things, which is very unique for her to add it to an existing institution and to be able to navigate and teach it in the system. The other has added it to various lectures, you know, and various, as sometimes giving lectures even within cohorts instances. In our case, I have fallen, as I said, one is already in the field. But what is unique about Abraham's case is the fact that apart from the contribution, a book chapter that he has made and has sent for publication, because of this project, he has been able to, now, let me just say something before that. He is now the moderator, no, not the moderator, the chair of the Ghana Presbytery, back into the church, which covers a large area of the Presbyterian Church in Ghana, in Accra here. And what he has done is to be able to include, or to use this one to kind of negotiate or to encourage the church to add indigenous contributors to the propagation of Christianity in the church. And not only that, but to begin to identify them and name them by instituting and identifying projects that they can remember, they can use to be remembered. And so that naming of institutions, naming of projects and things in line with these individuals who had contributed, so that it will not just be the key figure that he studied, but that it will generate into identifying others was also one part. So even not in teaching, he has used it to move into the church field. But in teaching, we have been using the material, especially for graduate studies. It's very important. Sometimes making references, as I was saying, sometimes even your own, it's not just about the data itself, but the experiences that we had, how such experiences are shaping research students. And the demands we now make on research, I make on my research students, I wouldn't have made some of them because prior to this one, I worked in my own linguistic context. And because I'm an insider, it was easier to do certain things. Now relating it to when I did this work and I was an outsider within the linguistic context, what I experienced. And so these things come to enrich your students as you teach, not only with the data, but also the experiential aspect of your own work. And it also helps you to demand, because you know, what are the surprising outcomes? And this is what we learned, you know, one of the things that, what were the surprises when you were doing your fieldwork? What did you plan and what didn't you plan? And how did it come up? And what are you going to make use of the surprises that come from the fieldwork that you did? These are things that you are using to enrich yourself with graduate studies, maybe that you would not have. But because these things were done at the project, which we couldn't get them in other place, it was helpful. And lastly, it is not just the material, but we had 2 other support materials that, and I'm using the same material, text materials. One, TBN gave us books, very important books. They gave us books and they also made us to buy, to give them lists that they could buy. These books were books that were instrumental for our career and our teaching. And we are using them as resource texts. Then secondly, anytime we met, data was given. When we met in South Africa, there was so much material that Nelly put in pen drives for us. We are using them to teach. If you ask my PhD students, I draw some of this for my students to use to work. So it's not just the data that we gathered, but the different aspects of material that we enriched ourselves during the process are being used to teach as texts in courses and as experiential issues that we share with our students and from our data. I don't know if I've answered all.
No, this is I think this is very impressive. Thank you, Rosemary. I think our audience definitely will take home something. This kind of initiatives are meant to cross-fertilize, they are interdisciplinary. The days are gone when we are trapped in our disciplinary silos. You will commit academic suicide if you say, I'm in simply theology, and that is what I would do for life, or I'm in drama, I don't want to look elsewhere. It's only drama or nothing. If you are still doing that, know that you are committing academic suicide slowly. And I think having these projects and cross-fertilization enriches not just you as a person, but enriches your student, enriches your department, enriches your university, and helps us in a way to decolonize our curriculums. We inherited very colonial, curriculums, and it's the onus lies on us to deconstruct and decolonize in a way that makes them more useful for those we are teaching. Okay, I'm going to stop here. But I know that some of you have questions and comments to Rosemary. So perhaps the best way to utilize the short time we have left is to bring us back to the gallery so we can see who has a question or a comment, and then we'll call on you. And when we identify you, please don't preach. Don't give another lecture. Just make your point cogent in a few sentences, and then we'll have a response from Professor Rosemary Amenga-Etego. All right, so I would like to open the floor for Q&A or comments. You have the time to speak now or forever be quiet. So who would like to go first? Francis? Would you like to unmute, and then after that, Benson has the hand up. So let's start with Francis. Francis, unmute and say where you're calling from or where you're joining from, and then your comment or question. And then Joyce will follow after Benson. So Francis, are you there? You have to unmute. Okay, while he's doing that, Benson, could you go on the floor? Let us see not just your voice, but your face, if possible.
All right, thank you very much, Rosemary, for this beautiful reminiscence of your stay at Nagel, where we always know that the fear of Nelly is the beginning of wisdom. So we have gotten that. But I just want to ask if you could throw more light on how you went about analyzing your data. I wasn't too clear, or I just want, if you could tell us one or two things, how you went about analyzing the data from the field. Thank you.
All right, Rosemary, just to add, Francis is at the library and cannot talk. So let me read the question. The question from Francis is the data archived? If yes, where, and is it possible for one to have access to the data? So would you like to take those two, and then we come back with questions from Clementine?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the data as of now is not archived. Each of us has their data, individual data. My data has been worked on by our university at the library and synthesized it so that I can have it in my collection. But it is not archived. It is still a private archive, to put it that way. So it's with me. The reason is we haven't yet got that to that point whereby we can put our data on the system. And secondly, we still have, we have just finished and want to make a bit use of our material. We know that there are cases that as soon as you put material there, then it's taken, and the original intent that you have, you can't do it because you haven't even made use of it. And the technology for us to properly archive these things is even a problem. So for instance, you put it in various forms and you put in pen drives, just to store them for the meantime. But because we haven't finished our main projects, maybe in the future we will archive it in the institution, but we haven't yet put that up.
Thank you.
Secondly,
so for instance, yes.
So if you want something, then you have to contact me, for instance, and then if I have material that I can share with you. But the second aspect of that, and to tell you too, part of my material has not even been transcribed. Part of the material is not yet transcribed. There was so much material that we recorded. So we haven't done that. How do we analyze? Different people use different things to analyze. I just did content analysis with the material that I transcribed and I needed to use. In my case, the primary material that I used was songs. Those songs are online, Susie and Matt. And so, but what I did was to take the same songs, which are not in Twi, which are not in English, but they're in Twi, and ask somebody who is a linguist to transcribe the songs, the original songs, just as they hear them, the music, give the music and transcribe the music as you hear it into Twi and then into English. And the fellow is a linguist in Twi, Akan. And then after that, give the same material to two different scholars. One, Akan, in the African indigenous religion, not myself, and another in African Christianity. And they both critiqued the criticisms and they gave very good criticisms on the one who transcribed the material. One, the Christian is busy saying that it's good, but this fellow was too traditional and was bringing indigenous concepts into it. The indigenous person is accusing the transcriber and saying that you don't know what you're about. The concepts that you are translating as Christian are not Christian, but they are indigenous. And therefore you translated and transcribed them wrongly. This is what I use for my work. And so far, even that data, the cross-fertilization of arguments on something that is already in the system, in YouTube, that you can download the work. But people looking at them from different perspectives have given me so much material that I have not even finished looking at. And I have two materials that I'm working on with this particular data that I'm talking about. One is looking at Christianity and African culture, and the one looking at how African indigenous religion is preserved through Akan music. So there's so much that we have. So looking at that, I was able to do my work. But different people have used different methods. But for me, it was that was the approach I used, using music, but looking at them, because my key thing, one, is to look at who translated. I get a specialist, but is the specialist translating them right? Does the specialist include the context when the specialist is translating? Does the specialist, who is himself an Akan, understand what they are translating? That the specialist is also an Akan and a Christian. Is the specialist biased towards Christianity? These were the things I was looking for to make my analysis.
No, thank you, Rosemary. I think one point is very clear that, and this has been rehashed. You can you have your data bank, which you can continue to tap on 10 years after your project. So I think that some of you will have a similar experience. So don't smuggle every data into your report, because you will crash. It will not work. Let me give a space to Clementine and Paul, but before that, I've noted the comment, what looks like a question from Mobolaji Ajibade. I need a scholar to collaborate with, and I just would encourage you. This is why you are part of this audience. This is why you are part of this networking group. So you look and see who is speaking to you. Who can you work with? Who can you, you know, pick out as your interlocutor, and feel free to reach out. I think this is where we can keep the conversation on.
And Prof,
yes.
Prof, if I may put a caveat there, in as much as you are looking for somebody to collaborate, you must be careful with who you collaborate with, because sometimes the distance, in our case, and I'm going back to something that I didn't mention, but in our case, because we came from distant places, we spent so much money on transportation, airfares,
yes,
because you have to travel in and out. So in as much as possible, try to keep the number minimum and try to keep maximize travel, because travel consumes a lot of money. That's what I would say. If, as much as you are looking for a collaborator, keep that in mind.
Yes, no, thank you for that footnote. Yes, so Clementine, you have the floor.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much. I think I've learned a lot today, and okay, let me be quick. I know we should be finishing soon, but maybe this question is directed to not only Rosemary, but also maybe everybody at NIGA Institute. Because when I listen to your story, you are not just a young academic. You are not a person who is starting up. You are a well-established academic, a well-established person in your career. So I thought I should ask, what message of, let me call it a message of hope, do you have for young academics in terms of applying for sponsorship and approaching your institution?
Thank you, Clementine. Where are you joining from?
I'm joining from South Africa, in Johannesburg.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So Rosemary?
So I was just going to say that young academics are also to be mentored. And my experience made me to mentor somebody in my institution, in my department, to take the next step. And she is also a PI, but she's young. She just finished a PhD not up to 5 years. So now she's a PI, and I'm mentoring her. I'm showing her what some of the things that I learned. So, but at the same time, mentoring means that somebody must also be willing to be mentored. So look around, there are people there, and see who can you work with to help you, who has gone through the process before, because we are there to help. We who have been there before, if you approach us and you ask us, how do I go about it? Reach out to them. They may be able to help you to navigate some of the hurdles that you have. And if you happen to even get a grant, so that's not the end of it. You still may need somebody to mentor you alongside even what you are doing. So there are some of them in South Africa who got the grant. Reach out to them, let them mentor you, ask them, how do I get to do this, and see how far you can go.
No, thank you, Rosemary. And Clementine, I just want to encourage you that the NEGEL project, we are very open. The current project, which is the Engaging African Realities, intentionally limited those who can be project leaders. It was specifically stated this is for early career scholars. So, and I think you fall into that category. And what we are trying to do with our programs is to encourage conversation between whether senior or middle or early. we are all in the same boat. So you have to empower yourself, and you can do it. One way to think about this is, what do you want to do? And you have to have a conversation with those who are more experienced for guidance. How do I start with what I want to do? So, and there are many ways to do this. You must not apply for a big grant at the beginning. You might start by just applying for, if you're a graduate student, applying for a graduate student grant, either research or for conference. So there's a million of opportunities. And I think what I will enjoin you is, don't wait for information to come to you. Go out there and search for the information that is already available. And feel free to keep in touch with us, and we would, if you have specific questions, we'll be quite happy to have a conversation with you. Okay, thank you. So let's go to Paul. Paul, would you like to state your question? I'm looking at my time. Paul, do you want to state your question in person, or you want me to read that?
Okay, all right. So I can just state it in person. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. Thank you. Good talk, good discussion. I just want to ask this for the sake of some of us working and those that will be listening. I hear you teach with the data you have gathered, and the possibility of finding something slightly different when you analyze some other part of your data is there. So 2 points. One is, when you're teaching, it's good for students to know that it's work in progress. And then as soon as you also find something that is contrary, it's important to update it. Otherwise, the same project will be given to contrary findings. Just wanted to point that out. Otherwise, I'm glad to be here. It's been a good afternoon, and thank you very much. Nelly, good to see you and everybody.
So Paul, could you say where you are joining from?
Okay, all right. So I'm speaking from Lagos, Nigeria.
Okay.
Working on one of the projects.
All right. No, thank you. Yeah, just to let some of you know that Paul is one of the project leaders currently working on Nollywood and evangelical films in Nigeria, and was a recent guest at the Nagel Institute, Calvin University. So thank you for joining us. Rosemary, before you respond to that, Francis has come. I'm sure that, posing questions from his library reading desk is interesting. And he says, as a former grantee and now an advisor, what one thing would you advise incoming applicants to consider in their grant application to increase their chances of winning a grant? So if you would like to combine that with Paul's intervention briefly.
I think Paul's intervention just talks about the fact that we need to update our data, which is true, because if not, that you will still maintain the same information. And it's true that sometimes you go to teach with students and they bring you alternative ideas, some enriching, some questioning what you already have. And that is important. So that is taken in good faith. The other one you said is, I can't remember again.
Yeah, so that is the question from
the chances of,
from Francis, saying, what advice would you have, as a former grantee and now an advisor, what one thing would you advise incoming applicants to consider in their grant application to increase their chances of winning a grant?
I think as research questions and methodology are very key. What are the objectives that you want? What are the research questions that you are posing? And how are you going to achieve what you say you want to achieve? I think these are very key. Yes. Theory is important. Yes, I'm not saying it's not important, it's important, but I'm saying these two, especially the methodology, has become very, very crucial. So how do you tie your question, your problem, your question, your objective with the methodology? How do you want to, how are you going to achieve what you say you want to do?
Yes. No, thank you for those nuggets. And also, I forgot to mention to Clementine, pay attention, go to the Nagel website, if you have access to our Facebook and all the resources that we offer, so that you can acquaint yourself with that.
Somebody was asking, if you say, I'm saying this, I'm not saying that the area of your research is not important, but whether it is new or it's an old area, these questions and methodology will let them know whether there's something new about what you are going to do or not. So I'm not saying that don't look for a very rich area or an interesting area too. Yes, your topic, those things are important, but I'm saying that whatever area you choose to do, whether it is overbeaten or not, the essence is that justify it in such a way that they will know what you are doing. It's good, it's nice, it's achievable.
Yes. No, thank you. Thank you for those additional input. Yeah, we will be wrapping this up shortly. The Secretariat would like to have an evidence that you were part of this conversation. So even though you've decided not to speak. So we are requesting that everyone, before we take the last 1-2 questions, everyone should come up, put your video on. We want to have that as a concrete evidence, because we do notice that some people sign on and then they put they mute their video and audio and go to the market, and before they are back from the market, the show is over. So if you are here in person, if you've not gone to the market, could you just put on your video for 2 minutes, and then we can have a gallery picture. So whoever is not putting on the video means that they are in the restaurant or in the pub. And we also would note that we like people attending our meetings from the pub. All right, do we have everyone? So Nebudo and Nelly, can we do a capture? We have 2 pages, and we want to take the first page, and then could we move on to the second page? Some people are just returning from the market. That is okay. Joyce and Tozake and Tayo is in the bathroom. That is also fine.
I've been trying to just put the whole thing on, sir. It's quite problematic.
Okay, so yeah, it's also okay if you're in the other room. That's completely fine.
And my Zoom is unable to detect a camera.
All right, so there's some public confession, so we understand. Whether we can see you or you are in the other room is also fine. I think we just want to have a kind of a group representation of your participation. And I want us to be out of here in 2 minutes. So please feel free to continue to send your questions. The conversation continues. So if you have any questions, Professor Mary Amenga-Etego is easily accessible. You don't have to fill forms. If you have questions for us in the Secretariat, please rush your questions and comments to us. But it leaves me just to say a big thank you to all of you for being part of the conversation. I am going away with something. I've learned something I don't know about you. I hope that you are also taking something away. But join us in keeping up with this conversation. Let us brainstorm together in order to be better academics. And let me thank Nelly and Nebudo again for making this technically possible. Let me also thank the God of the internet, for making many of you to be able to join without cutting you off. Even though David is giving us a good effect, that is also fine. But lastly, let me thank Rosemary for this very, rich, all-embracing conversation and nuggets and pieces of advice that you've shared with both our prospective intending applicants, but also our current, but also past grantees. This is very illuminating, and we thank you for all you do. And we hope that you will join us again by March 30th, when we'll have another edition of the webinar. So on behalf of me and my partners in not in progress, but in crime. Okay, no, I'm just kidding.
No.
Yes, thanks for joining us, and wish you a great afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you are joining from. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
This is for Rosemary. Yeah.